All right, good evening, everybody. We're here, I'm Dr. Nate Gershfeld with the Fasting Escape. We're here at the Fasting Escape Live on Sunday evening. And this is a place where people come to regain their health through the use of fasting and a health-promoting lifestyle, health-promoting diet. So it's my honor to welcome my mentor and my friend, my very good friend, Dr. Doug Lisle. Come on.
Well, we're here with Chef AJ running the show as usual. So she's told me we're live, so don't say anything stupid. That's what she said. So we'll try. All right, I don't have anything a planned talk. We're just going to do this Q&A. So any questions about anything, and we'll go from wherever we start. If you don't come up with anything, I'll just start. Health, happiness, diet, sleep, exercise.
Question sex.
What's that? But don't forget sex. So AJ was talking nothing but about sex all at dinner, so we already got educated. All right. Yes.
As a patient who's fasting, and I came in thin already,
Yes.
and have lost a tremendous amount of weight,
Yes.
my biggest concern is when I return to work and all the questions I'm going to get. And I really don't want to tell everybody what I've done because I don't think a lot of people are open and understanding. So I'm curious about how in the world I'm going to respond.
Where do you live?
In Seal Beach.
Seal Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just going to tell you wear baggy clothes.
I have.
Yeah, and I would do that actually. I would wear, an undershirt and then a blouse that goes over it that's baggy.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I would do.
I've already been stockpiling.
Good, excellent. The aside from that, I'm really, I guess, I don't have anything particular that I would say. If you get cross-examined, you could say, well, I went to this health place and they had a strict diet and I lost some weight, but it's all coming back. You know what I'm saying? We could just say, keep it matter of fact. And just blow it off. If they ask what strict diet, just say, typical veggie crazy, fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. In other words, we're not going to do much educating. We're just going to shuck and jive our way around it. But I think the important thing is just get some clothes on you that make this so that they don't know what they're looking at. Okay, and that's what I would do. All right. Okay. Yes.
Well, I think it's even for people who don't do this like 100%. Even communicating with your friends sometimes becomes a challenge. Discussing the minute you start bringing up an issue of fasting or eating only plant-based diet, it becomes you become the one of the crazy wing.
Sure. Of course.
So how do you generally recommend to bring this up, or even not bring it up, or how do you discuss it with people without?
I don't bring it up. Okay, so I'm never going to bring this up. If it comes up, in other words, if people already know who I am and they know what it is that I do, or that they see that I'm eating something different than everybody else is going to eat, and there's any cross-examination, I'm going to make it very matter of fact. So it's going to be like, this is what I'm doing, and in other words, there's going to be no conversation about the reason. There's going to be no conversation about anything educational. You can just forget it. Obviously, every situation is different. If you have someone who appears sincerely interested, and you know something about their personality that they're inherently open to experience, then that's different. But usually not. In other words, we start with a sort of a baseline principle in understanding human motivation, and that is that the fundamental core of human motivation is going to be what I call esteem. It's about where it is that how valuable we are to other people, and essentially, I might as well be wandered into this immediately. So. Oh, see? Esteem. That's AJ right there. So, yeah.
I was giving you esteem.
Yes, you were giving me esteem. So there's there's 4 primary types of relationships that people have in the world, and those relationships are going to be mates. Now, we've got people from Australia here, like really good-looking people. Just so everybody knows, there's really good-looking people from Australia, which appears to be how Australia works. All right, so they would say mates, and they mean friends, but we mean mates. So this is, so here we have mates and then friends. And then trading partners. And finally, there's a 4th type of relationships that we will call family. Okay? I put family off to the side because family is an inherently different type of relationship than the other 3, because these 3 are competitive. So these 3 types of relationships define the targets of human action. This is the result of successful mating, successful biologically. And so as a result, this is now the underlying motivational system of the organism. The ultimate purpose of the organism's existence is the reproduction of DNA. And so in order to do that, what the creature has to do is it has to actually get resources. And it's going to turn out that the most important resources that human beings are going to get is going to be esteem from other people. And that's because in order to survive and reproduce, there's going to be certain types of resources that are going to be essential in securing their statistical probability of survival and reproductive success. Mates is obvious. Friends is also pretty obvious. If you look at human beings don't live solitary. We're a wolverine. There's one wolverine per 50,000 acres, but human beings actually congregate in groups. And you see the most striking characteristic that there is that makes us completely different than other animals is speech. Okay, so it doesn't do any good at all to have an incredibly sophisticated ability to communicate if you're not communicating with other creatures. So this extraordinarily striking characteristic that we have, where the average speaker has 60,000 words at their disposal and can communicate the most subtle processes of what's going on inside their mind and describe that to other people. And they can literally, I can sit here and do this, and 25 people in this room can actually be following my every thought. That's unbelievably efficient, okay? And it's an extraordinary characteristic. And so this is part and parcel of how it is that we have friendships, because friendships are going to be based, as all of these relationships are going to be based on trades, okay? And what's being traded in friendship, there's various things that are being traded, but fundamentally, what's being traded is insurance. That's clearly where friendships began, was under the process of insurance, and we're really the only species that has anything like this. There's a few other species where they're a little bit helpful to each other, but never to the degree that human beings are helpful to each other. If you break your leg and you're a solitary human in the woods or on the African savanna where our ancestors came from 100,000 years ago, you're pretty well dead. Okay, you're not going to make it. The predators are going to see you limping. You can't secure food. You're done. Okay. If you're a Thompson's gazelle and you break your leg on the African savanna, stick your foot in a snake hole and it snaps, you're dead. Okay? The other Thompson's gazelle that has been running along beside you for most of your life that you thought was your friend, you probably didn't think it was your friend, it was just a pleasant animal that didn't give you any trouble particularly, and it was another secure set of eyes and ears looking out for predators, so you watched what he or she did. But the bottom line is it wasn't your friend, and when you stick your foot in the snake hole and it snaps, they don't whine over it, they don't circle around you, and they don't try to figure out how to help you, because that's not how they're designed. They're not designed with a deep compassion for you, because that's not part of their natural design. They don't have friendships. Now, the compassion you will see in the animal kingdom extends to mother-infant offspring. That's how that works, because your genes are in that little kid, and therefore the psychological mechanisms, moms will do what they can, what is possible for them to do. If they feel like they can't help, then they aren't particularly upset about it, and they'll walk away from an offspring. You won't see this in humans. Humans will communicate tremendous amounts of feelings to other groups of humans, because the other humans can do spectacular things to aid you when you're in trouble. Okay? And they're designed by nature with compassion chips, because compassionate feeling is evidence that someone is in need and there's something that might be able to be done about it. And there's a phenomenal biological profit that sits underneath these potential traits. And the profit is that literally if I break my leg, I'm almost certainly dead. But when my friend sees that I've got a broken leg, and he or she feels the compassion, can see that I'm in trouble, and if they will aid and abet me for 4 or 5 weeks and do double time and get real skinny because they can't hardly get enough food for both them and me at the same time, but they could do it. When I'm now fully healed, what has happened is we had a very small expense to them in terms of their statistical likelihood of survival and a reduced possibility for reproduction over 4 or 5 weeks. But we literally traded that for an entire life. So when it comes to the accounting of life, that is a massive profit. And the question is, how do we get an organism to put out the capital to do that? And the answer is you have to have an organism that was designed by nature around compassion chips so that they have attachments to non-genetic other creatures and can feel for them and want to have a compulsion to help them when they see them they're in trouble. If you do that, then what we're going to get is a phenomenon called delayed reciprocal altruism, which is that I know when I'm helping him, when he's in trouble, he's exceedingly likely to help me if the shoe's on the other foot. So you can see that in a group of 20 or 25 people like we would have in this room that would be typical of hunter-gatherer ancestry, what we're going to see is that there's close psychological ties, and that when somebody's in trouble, there's multiple individuals that don't, but by having several individuals pony up a little bit of their extra energy, that individual gets to survive. And how do they feel? Grateful. Okay? So you're seeing the genesis of the moral sentiments and where it is that they sit. And they sit right inside of a phenomenal characteristic that human beings have, which is the extension of insurance, is what we call friendship. Okay? So mates is obvious. So we see that we have to have mates in order to reproduce. We really have to have friends in order to come anywhere close to optimizing our likelihood of survival. Okay? And then finally, human beings do something else that no other animal does, and that is that they trade. So this is another extraordinary advantage. So we're now looking at the reasons why human beings dominate the earth. The Neanderthals, from everything that we can tell, had actually brains just as big as ours and did not succeed. Why? There's no evidence that they traded. They were kind of unfriendly. Okay? So they may have had friendship pacts, but they were probably very suspicious and hostile to outgroups, which is something that we see characteristic of other primates. So if a group of male chimpanzees sees a male chimpanzee from another troop out, in the wild, they will try to kill it. There's no doubt about it. Like, that's exactly what they're going to do. As soon as they see it, it's on, and it's to the death. That's what they're up to. Not humans. Human beings have an extraordinary characteristic not seen in other primates, which is that when females are much friendlier, but if males see other males that they don't know, they actually treat each other as honorary friends. In other words, you are my friend until I see evidence that you're actually going to try to exploit me. Okay? So we all start out friendly. Why? The reason is trade. Okay? Because human beings figured out that these other people that we don't know and that we're not attached to by friendships can have knowledge and abilities that we don't have. And let's suppose one of these guys knows really well how to make fish hooks, and we're really good at fishing, and it would be a waste of time for me to make my own fish hooks when they're 10 times better at it than I am, and I'm 10 times better of a fisherman than they are. It's my favorite example. I got to come up with a new one because I'm talking to vegan groups. And this is, sorry, but you can just imagine this though. What a waste of time that this would have been to do your own thing when somebody else can do it better. All you need is to have an understanding in your head that if we trade, we're both better off, and it generates what economists call a consumer surplus. Okay? It turns out that you don't need to learn this. The human children spontaneously start to do this at age 2. That's how early this happens. They start thinking, listen, I like the green ones, you seem to like the blue ones, I have more of the blue ones, you got the green ones, let's swap. And they start to figure out that both of them are happier even though no new goods have been discovered. They're essentially increasing the optimal, they're optimizing the way the goods are distributed in order to optimize, quote, human happiness, which is nothing other than a signal that you've increased survival reproductive success. That's what happiness is. That's what unhappiness is. All feelings are nothing other than signals that were designed by the genetic code into specified brain circuits that are essentially, it's an analog feedback system to tell you whether your biological prospects have raised or lowered. That's what all feelings are, whether they're physical pain or pleasure, or they're psychological pleasure, i.e. happiness, moods of happiness, or unhappiness, i.e. psychological pain. So it's going to turn out that the main currency then that's going to drive human success biologically, even though it's important for us, we've got temperature regulation equipment, we've got a hunger drive, we've got sleep drives. We are, we have pain signals that if little critters bite us or big critters threaten to bite us, we care about our generalized relationship between the environment, our habitat, and our physical survival. But that's not the main thing we're concerned about, because that's not the main source of variance for whether or not human beings are successful biologically or not. The main source of variance is what do other people think of us. That's the main source of variance, okay? And so it's going to turn out what these people think of her is extremely important to her psychology. What these people think of her is extremely important to her psychology, and what these people think of her is extremely important to her psychology. It's important for her to be esteemed, and esteem comes from the word comes from the word value. And the value means evaluation. And evaluation means comparison. Everything is valuable in comparison to something else. Okay? So human beings are evaluated against each other for what it is that they can bring to a person in an exchange that optimizes the statistical likelihood of what we call gene survival. So gene survival is where the rubber hits the road in all biology. It is the purpose of living things, is to pass on their genes to the next generation. So gene survival, so the purpose of the organism is not survival, it's gene survival. It's for its genes to wind up the next generation. Some of us are incredibly lousy at it. AJ, are you any better at it than I am? No, we're both just total losers. Oh well, what are you going to do about that? All right, so but we try to do gene survival relevant things. All right, here we go. So what's going to turn out is that we have a device inside of our head to try to track what's happening under competitive processes to see whether or not our advertisements are working. So what we do is we compete. We compete for these relationships against our other people in the village. And so what's going to happen is that we must advertise. So advertising is the mechanism by which competitive processes are resolved. So advertising ultimately means that we are displaying what we're going to call cost-benefit ratio, or what in business school they call a value proposition. Okay? So this is what people do, is they display value propositions. So in this case, she's got 3 possible mates there. This guy's not so hot, she's not that interested. This guy's probably the right guy, name's Horace, works at a bank, good solid job. She's really not that excited about Horace, but it's pretty good. This one's Jimmy, plays guitar. Actually, he came out of the womb with a really cool tattoo. His long hair and an earring. Okay, she's sort of a lot more interested in him. Something's tugging at her nervous system this direction. But she's running a cost-benefit analysis as they all run a cost-benefit analysis on her. And so what she does is she advertises. Okay? And what happens with that advertising, if you were a company and you did advertising, and you spent a bunch of money, if you were a car company, you spent a bunch of money on an ad, it wouldn't do any good to just spend money on the ad and then just keep going. You would want a feedback system that would tell you whether the advertisement was worthwhile. You would be running a cost-benefit analysis on that advertisement. And so there'd be no other rational way to behave. If you didn't do that, you would surely go broke at some point. So you need to be able to adjust your advertisements depending upon what the feedback is from your market. And that's what human beings do. So they need a mechanism of feedback to tell them about whether their advertisements are either successful or unsuccessful. And what that is, they have a device in their head that we're going to call an esteem meter. Okay? And this is a device, you might think I'm just making this up, but this is actually well researched and considered by Mark Leary at Duke, a social psychologist in the mid-1990s. So he did a series of experiments which he calls something else. He calls it a sociometer. So anybody at home that's interested in reading a little bit more about this, you can look up sociometer theory. This is his theory isn't as complex as this because it was being written 20 years ago. But this is now, we're using sociometer theory as we guide our way through the lens of evolution to see why it is that human beings are built and motivated the way they are. The esteem meter is going to be sensitive to what we're going to call esteem signals. So here, Horace stands in she wears a nice dress that she picks out at Macy's and goes to work, and there's Horace. Jimmy's down in the mailroom, always looking cool. But his prospects don't look that good, and he's kind of flaky, and he doesn't show up that often. But she still gets weak in the knees when she goes by there. But she's also interested in what Horace has to say. So Horace gives her positive feedback. And if Horace gives her positive feedback, that's going to create a mood of happiness inside of her nervous system. And the reason is that that is indicative of a statistical increased likelihood of gene survival, because he seems like a good catch. It turns out if he gives her a negative signal, then this is going to be unhappiness or depression. Now we might say, well, gee, does she get clinically depressed from negative feedback from Horace? Well, maybe she does, but forget the word clinical. Just get that out of our heads, and we're not going to think like late 20th century psychiatrists with fancy labels that are trying to shunt people into a diagnosis that means that we're going to treat them with some chemical altering substance. Forget about that. Depression is just a signal. It is a biological signal of failure. Okay? Depression is not a chemical imbalance in anything's brain. What depression is it's evidence of failure. That's the purpose of being depressed. It's exactly the same purpose as if you burn your hand on the stove. If you burn on your hand on the stove, we don't say, oh, well, you have this pain in your hand where the burn is, which is a chemical imbalance in your hand. And so no. We say that this is failure feedback. It's evidence that you made a mistake. That's what it is. And the same thing is happening here. So this is a signal just as important. The negative signals in life are just as important as the positive signals. It's absolutely essential that you have pain mechanisms. You have very sophisticated pain mechanisms to warn you when you're doing things that are threatening or damaging to the organism. Of course, the same thing is true with respect to prospects for esteem, which will guide larger decision-making processes that will result in either the attainment or loss of critical social assets that will define your success or failure biologically. Okay? So she's sensitive to these things, and if she gets positive feedback, it's a mood of happiness. Gets negative feedback, it's going to be depressing. She gets positive feedback from this gal here who's really cool, intelligent, connected, capable, not psychologically needy, and therefore a potentially useful friend. Notice that in all cases here, what we're seeing is that through the eyes of the individual, they're running comparisons and they have preferences. That in fact their nervous systems are constructed to be incredibly choosy about where it is that they invest their time and energy in order to get a maximum payoff that will aid and abet their statistical likelihood of gene survival. What we're going to find, all of this, the entire thing, is being run by gene survival, and it's all being run by cost-benefit analysis. The entire operation is being run by cost-benefit analysis. And so the organism has exactly two assets that are going to be responsible, that it has to use in order to survive and reproduce. Those two assets are time and energy. They are the two constraining resources in life, okay? So this thing needs to be very judicious about how it uses its time and energy. So that's why it has to have a feedback system for its advertisements. Because if it wastes its time and energy, it's wasted its life. So it has to have this kind of a system, okay? Now it's going to turn out that, so if this person gives her positive feedback, creates moods of happiness, gets negative feedback, creates moods of sadness or depression. It's assigned by nature that way. She wants to get a cool job at a company where they give you free food and stock options and everybody thinks it's really great, okay? It's in the Bay Area, the rents are high, okay? But the point is, what is she, well, if they say, oh yes, we love your resume, we'd love to have you work, oh, that's exciting. They say, no, we're not interested in you. You're not good enough. What, you only have a 3.95 from NYU? Sorry, you're not working at our company, okay? So this is, again, depression. So this is how this is going to work, but the system is simply designed to have its feelings simply tracking the feedback, and essentially the result of they're essentially interpreting the data that comes from the outside world, just in the same way that other sensory systems are interpreting threats and opportunities with respect to physical survival issues. Okay? So, in fact, when people give us good feedback, when they are really nice to us and they seem like a really nice personality and friendly, what do we call that? Warm. What do we call it when they're not like that? Cold. See? We call somebody that's a really nice person a sweetheart. Sweet. Okay? Sourpuss. That's the other side. You can see that our language is tracking these issues as if they are physical sensation issues. In fact, when we meet people, if we really like them, we actually will say to them, it's been a pleasure. It's not a pleasure. Pleasure is what happens as a result of direct action on sensory nerves. That's for food and sex. Okay? That's what that is. No, we're saying it has caused such an intense mood of happiness in me to meet you, it's as if it was a pleasure. That's what we're saying. Okay? Now, where did this thing start, AJ? Who asked this question? What was the question? Oh, what do you say to people that...
Keep going. I like this. That was my question.
Okay, your question is about how it is that we talk to people about these issues and the conflicts socially that come up with respect to our food habits being different than other people. Mm-hmm. And what I was explaining is that sometimes people's questions come from an honest, friendly openness, and they're cross-examining us because they're trying to learn something. But most of the time, that's not true. Most of the time, what's taking place is that they are feeling threatened. And they're feeling threatened because you're doing something different than they're doing. And what you're doing differently is not adding 16 slices of cheese to your pastrami sandwich. Because if you were doing that, they would laugh and smile and it would be funny. Okay? Why? Because it would be obviously self-indulgent and really not as a result of not causing anything admirable. You weren't really trying to do anything to cause anything admirable. You were just being self-indulgent and maybe kind of creative and fun. But if you eat something healthy, something that looks healthy in front of them, and everybody else is doing differently, then they feel the threat. And the threat that they feel is, oh, you're trying to demonstrate to the village that you are both more knowledgeable and more self-disciplined than the rest of us, right? That's what you're trying to say, aren't you, by your behavior? Okay? And then it starts. And then the cross-examination starts. And what we have to realize is that our natural instincts are going to be to do the following. Well, funny you should ask. It turns out that I'm extremely knowledgeable about this. And I can tell that you've got some health problems just by looking at you. And so therefore, let me just, I only have about 3.5 hours to spare. So let me sit down with a paper and pencil and tell you chapter and verse about why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing so that you can be educated, turn your health around, and then come back and kiss my feet in about 3 months and tell me how great I was and how it is that and tell the whole village how it is that I helped you. That's how you're built. That's why many of you are in doctors and going into lifestyle medicine. You want to give the village the most valuable thing that you could possibly give them. What could possibly be more valuable than actually getting sick people well? I don't know anything more valuable than that. It's their life itself. So that's why we've got these young doctors in the room tonight. That's what it is that they're doing. They were smart enough and conscientious enough that they realized, you know what? I found this direction. This is the best use that I could possibly make of my life. To do what? Become as esteemed as possible in my village. How can I earn the most esteem in the village? The answer is, put yourself in a position to be knowledgeable enough to literally turn people's lives around and give them back the help that their lives deserves. That's what you want to do. Okay? Now, but when you and I get asked, we're not doctors like that. But it doesn't matter. The little chip goes off in our head because we've read things. We want to share that information. This is a reason why human beings dominate the earth, is because they're teaching fanatics. They want to share everything with the village. They want it. Freud 100 years ago said the human being was not designed to keep secrets. It's not. When you learn something, you want to tell the village because you want credit for having brought the village some valuable information. That's totally legitimate. You better, because your competitors are trying to do it. So of course you're designed by nature to try to figure out how to help the village. Everybody in the village is running for most valuable player. You want to be as valuable as you can possibly be. That's why people do what they do. So they try to figure out how to be as valuable as they can be. So, there you are. They asked us the question. Here we are, advertising. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, ask. Go. Come on. Yeah, you see what I'm eating? See what you're... Yeah, go ahead. Come on. If they ask, it's going to be hard for us to not bite on that. Right? You've got 2 million years of evolution as a group primate that can talk and communicate. You want to tell them. What they want to do is they want to tell you, no, I know what you're up to. You're trying to show off that you're the most intelligent, most conscientious member of the village. But you're one of those B people? Well, just wait. Just wait till the cross-examination starts, because in about 16 seconds, I'm going to ask you where you get your protein from. That's what's going to happen. Okay? They've got this little hammer in their back pocket. They're just waiting. They're waiting. Yeah, so well, so you've been doing those, so you're bad. Yeah. Where did you get your protein from? That's what they're going to do. Smash your hand right there on the table. That's what they're intending to do. Right? So what we want to do usually is to completely sidestep our way around all of this. Even though what we would like to do is to educate them chapter and verse. For our young doctors here, you're in a little different position, obviously, because you're in a position of authority when you have a doctor-patient relationship. When you don't have a doctor-patient relationship, you're also in a special position of authority, but you're not in a special position of authority relative to your colleagues. Okay? So your colleagues are going to, once again, hear the same thing, that it looks like you're getting uppity and you're trying to display greater conscientiousness and intelligence, and forget it. Okay? I'm going to come after you with my hammer. It's going to be about 16 seconds from now. I'm going to ask you the questions to try to crush you. And that's what people do. So that's why I try to sidestep my way out of those things as elegantly as possible. Now, what do? They ask me what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm eating my lunch. Well, how come you're eating such a strange lunch without any dead decaying flesh in it? Oh, I don't know, just having lunch. Really? Or are you like a V person? One of those weird V people? Yeah, well, I'm kind of doing a plant-based diet. Seems like it's working for me. Oh, well, it's not going to work for you because you don't have enough protein. Oh, you're probably right. Where are they going to go? Where do they go with that? Well, you better look into that. Yeah, probably right. Well, your doctor, they're going to tell you, well, I checked with my doctor. My doctor says it seems like it's fine for now. Actually, I am a doctor. That's what you guys can do. One way, but what we want to know is that the back of this is a steam process. The back of it is essentially a pack animal that lives in dominance hierarchies, that is feeling anxiety that your behavior is creeping up higher than them, and they can feel that they are receding just that fast. And so that's why you will find that if we use these methods to shuck and jive our way on these cross-examinations, to not try to push to actually display superior knowledge, if we actually slip around them and say, yeah, I'm just doing this kind of an experiment, seems to be working, who knows, probably not right for everybody. If we use that kind of conversation, they're not interested. Because the only thing that actually drove their curiosity at all was the fear that you were making a display to make them look bad and make yourself look good. As soon as you start to communicate that you're not in that game, they can relax. I rarely get cross-examined further once I send the message that I am not actually trying to grandstand and embarrass you or to make myself look better than you. Okay? That's, as soon as I send those signals, like, where do you get your protein from? I don't know. As soon as I say that, that's a text message to their unconscious that they now know I'm not fighting them for esteem in this conversation. If I say, well, I just get my protein from all the plant food. No, you don't. Nope. My sister's a dietitian. She says that you can't get protein from plants. Oh, yeah. It sounds like she must have been gone to Harvard Medical School while she was at it. Yeah, forget it. All right. So what we have here is competitive process, and what we're going to also have is the following. That we're going to see that the kinds of advertisements that people do is we're going to break into two different branches. The two kinds of ads that they're going to do are going to be mating ads, and they're going to be non-mating ads. And the mating ads are going to be things like singing, dancing, athletics, beauty, houses, and art. These are standard throughout the animal kingdom. So we're going to find that these are all methods that animals use to try to detect differences between individuals for mate selection. Human beings use them all, which is extraordinary. You've got a way bigger brain that can process an awful lot of information, and so they literally will grab them all and integrate them in a way that you won't see elsewhere. But we have something else, which is that we have other relationships that are really important. We have friendships, and we also have trade. And so we need a way to try to decipher who's more valuable in those arenas, and what the way we use is going to be an assessment of essentially 6 variables. And those 6 variables make up the lion's share of the individual differences in human beings. And so they're intelligence, and then 5 more variables known in personality psychology as the big 5. Okay, so the big 5 are openness to experience, conscientiousness, introversion, extroversion, agreeableness, and finally emotional stability. These 5 are, it's a major scientific achievement was to determine that these 5 are actually, let me explain. For a long time, people have thought of the notion of personality differences have been types. So you've heard that, or some of you have probably taken the Myers-Briggs and think that you have a certain type. Myers-Briggs is a bogus instrument with essentially 0 validity, okay? It's based on early 20th century Jungian psychology, which is based on quicksand. So this is actually, the way it actually works is this. that if you were to take, for example, all of the commonly used words in the English language or any other language, 60,000. 18,000 of them are these 6. 18,000 of the words that you know are these 6 concepts. Do you think it's a big deal that the Eskimos have 35 words for snow? How about the fact that you've got 3,000 words for intelligence? Okay? You are connoisseurs of individual differences in personality, and it entirely dominates the way you think about other people. You don't even know it. It's just so part of you, you don't even think about it. So there aren't types. What there are is ingredients. And these ingredients are matters of degree. They're on continua. So if you actually look at these, each of them is in a bell curve. Beautiful, symmetrical bell curves. Okay? And these bell curves, it turns out that these very same differences are found in other animals. Dogs. Dogs have the same ones. Why? Because what we're seeing is that these individual differences are solving deep problems and complex environmental decision problems for the genetic code. So, for example, openness to experience. If you're a rabbit, you have to make a decision how far you're going to go from the rabbit hole. If the average rabbit in the average habitat makes the best decision is to go 100 yards from the rabbit hole and go no further, then you're going to find that the average rabbit, after it goes 100 yards, it starts to have an anxiety that says, I better not go any further. Okay? If you have a rabbit that's willing to go 200 yards, then that's a rabbit that's abnormal. It doesn't have as much anxiety built into it, and therefore it's more adventurous. It's not getting a warning signal. That rabbit, we can see that it's actually got a distorted view of reality, and it's likely to make characteristic mistakes. Okay? That's why it's less in the gene pool. That's why if it might be down here at the 98th percentile, that it's very rare for that. There's not very many of those. These are the guys that bungee jump and drive their cars down the freeway at 165 miles an hour and do all kinds of swim with the sharks. Some of you, I think you do that. Just because you got a shark swimming look on you. But the point is that the folks here that are going to do this are going to take risks that may be spectacularly successful, which is why they still can succeed in the gene pool. But they're actually a miscalibrated organism with respect to what? The cost-benefit analysis on the decisions that they need to be making for gene survival. So that's how this is going to work. On the other side here, this is the guy that, like, I don't know, never left Seal Beach, okay? Like, never left. Like, never even took a trip to Long Beach or Los Angeles. Never even got in a car. Why? Not open to experience. Lives in his mom's garage, okay? Had one date. She asked him out. That was it. Like, this guy is going nowhere genetically. Why? Because he's not open enough. Same thing with a rabbit that's only going to go 20 yards from the rabbit hole. You're not going to find mates and you're not going to find food very well. It's going to be tough going. So this is why it is that these things fall in bell curves. Yes?
Is the theory that the genetic abnormality to one end or the other is correcting for an already existing defect?
They're not defects. Actually, sorry about this. These aren't defects. This is just the nature of nature, is that the nature has a species prototype, and then you're going to have slight differences from prototype on either side that are going to be a tiny bit different biochemically and build a slightly different structure, and they're almost as successful. Okay?
Well, but my question is, those differences, are those intended to eventually kind of move the normal?
They're not intended.
Evolutionarily.
No, what they are is that they're essentially risk management for the genes, because it's going to turn out that you never know when there's going to be a change in sunspot activity, and then what's going to happen is that we're going to burn out a lot of the vegetation, and if we burn out a lot of the vegetation, now there's not as many places to hide, so you better not go as far, or maybe you need to go further, and so now it's going to turn out that suddenly what was not very successful over here now becomes the most successful, and the entire bell curve shifts over to a new equilibrium. So it's going to turn out that the equilibriums are always changing. okay? And so that the diversity that you see in the gene pool around any characteristic at all is essentially buffering its stress tolerance for the species in general.
But it's much longer time scale, right?
Extreme, yes, absolutely. So here's where we're going to go here. So we're going to find out that the conscientious person here, super conscientious, this is what I call hyper-conscientious nut jobs, okay? These are the people that you want to hire. It's exactly who you want to hire. This is who you want running your operation. They're like up all night worrying about did they get that every little debit and credit just right in the cash drawer. They wouldn't even dream of taking an extra nickel, okay? That's who you want to hire. You don't want to be that person. If you are, oh well, too bad for you, okay? But the point is that if you're a flake, you don't have enough anxiety. So eventually you'll have anxiety when the sheriff takes your furniture and puts it out on the street and they say, you've been evicted, in case you didn't know, we sent you 17 notices. That they finally have a little bit of stress, but these people don't have a lot of stress, okay? Low conscientiousness. So this is, most people are in the middle, but they are accurately analyzing where they need to be when they're working for the phone company, is safely in the middle of the pack. You know what I mean? My annual report, yes, I phoned in a bunch of times and was sick, quote, on Fridays, but no worse than everybody else. So I should be safe, okay? So this is, if you're in the middle of the pack, you're safe. If you're over here, you're probably being exploited. If you work for yourself, you're probably successful because you're working harder than most of your competitors are ever going to work. So, this is how this is going to work. So hyperconscientiousness, strangely enough, winds up being what? A waste of time and energy, just as you'd expect. Okay. So when we look at it in an extreme form, we're going to find people washing their hands 60 times a day. They can't get out of the driveway. They got to come back and check the front door. You're watching what's bothering them. They could have left the stove on. Yeah, they could have, and the house could burn down. Really? I've left the stove on, and the house was there when I got back. It's just a little warmer than it was before I left, right? The point is that, but the hyper-conscientious person is going to invest extra time and energy in order to reduce the worst-case scenario. That makes them, in some places, unbelievably valuable. That's all we want on the Apollo program. That's all we want at a bunch of places. That's all we want in a surgical room. We want everybody that's staying up late, worrying about the fine details, making sure things are really organized, memorizing all the little stray facts. That's how that works, okay? The introversion, extroversion, this is, there's a possibility that the reason this diversity exists in the human gene pool is because of differential risk exposure, or possibly it's been driven by venereal disease. So it looks like there's coevolution has put a check on the extraordinary possible value of extroversion because the more extroverted people are, the more sex partners they have, all things being equal, by the time they're 25. And as a result of that, in other words, by holding openness constant and hoping conscientiousness constant, just of all you changed on the scale was extroversion, you would wind up with far more partners. If you wind up with far more partners, you've got vastly increased likelihood of VD, greater VD, less likelihood of being fertile. Okay, so all these things form together to show us why the optimal characteristic for humans is not over here where it looks like it is. The modern environment, it's a huge advantage to be an extrovert, but it looks like in evolution it wasn't as big of an advantage. And so that's what this looks like. It's not just VD, it's probably also general exposure to novel pathogens. So there's a check on how friendly and how open people are with respect to others. This is essentially a version of openness, but for people as opposed to habitats, right? The agreeable. So in these exchanges that are extraordinarily worth doing, and where there is profit in the exchanges, it's going to turn out that profit is what economists call consumer surplus. And so it's going to turn out essentially that by willingness to trade, you've created a pie of profit. So now who's going to get it? all right? So it's going to turn out, if you even got a tiny slice of that pie, you'd be better off trading than had you not traded, correct? So as a result, if you're dealing with somebody who's very tough to negotiate with and you happen to be really nice, you might wind up making a trade and getting a tiny little slice of the pie, and they get almost all the consumer surplus. That's not good. So we should find that human beings should evolve on average to be tough enough to be able to get half of the consumer surplus out of an exchange, okay, on average. And that's exactly what they are. Okay, so average human being is pretty agreeable enough to enter exchanges that are profitable, but not so agreeable as to get consistently exploited, right? Nice people, this is when, oh, he's a really nice guy. That's who you want fixing your car. Really nice guy. Why? Because he's a really nice guy and he's not going to exploit you. And you're designed by nature to look for those characteristics very quickly and size those up in people and try to figure out. And you can sense if they're disagreeable, careful, put your hand over your wallet, okay? However, that high disagreeable person might be very useful when they're your attorney. It's a good thing, okay? So this is this issue. And then emotional stability is going to be about how much energy the organism is going to be willing to invest in a given value proposition. So if they're very, very excitable, like a cheerleader, they're like all excited, okay? So this is in Hollywood. It's like, oh, great, got a new idea for a sitcom. Okay, new idea for a sitcom. Bunch of teenagers in Antarctica on a Taco Bell. Like, why? Why would we ever do this? If we're a wacky, Hollywood, unstable human, we think it's a great idea. And we want to go pitch a bunch, get money for it. It's going to fail. Here we have Horace the bank teller, and it's 1848, and they found gold at Sutter's Fort. He's like, yeah, so what? It's too stable. Guy doesn't seize opportunity because he doesn't have enough excitement over it. He's a flatliner. That's the way it goes. So this is how this works, and what's the right amount? In the middle of the bell curve, which is the average human being with an undistorted nervous system generating the average amount of excitement and willingness to expend resources given the average value proposition. That's how it would work. Okay? None of us goes down the middle. The one place where it's valuable to be at the extreme is friends, of course. Intelligence by its very nature is valuable. Intelligence literally means you've resolved ambiguity and you've reduced the likelihood of error. That's what intelligence means. Okay? So, but does that mean Stephen Hawking made less mistakes than everybody else in his life? No. Because this is also in the equation. See? These are other ways that the organism is computing value propositions on different situations. So this is one variable out of 6. Now, where were we? This was just all that social stuff. This thing was getting good when we were talking about the social stuff, and we just lost it and went into a steam process, which is all I want to talk about anyway. So this is, so now we're going to see, I guess we could talk briefly about something that would be useful for young doctors to know. Okay? Go ahead. Do you have something in mind?
Why does fasting work so well?
See what's on Nathan's head. Why does fasting work so well? I was going to talk about the ego trap.
Oh, no.
What do you think about that? Okay, so we're going to go quickly into a useful thing for young doctors to actually be aware of when you're trying to help motivate people in a motivational block that you're going to run into that's pretty important when you're trying to help people along in the process of trying to make healthy steps towards a better life. It's going to turn out that that there's more to the brain than just and more to social esteem process than just an esteem meter. There's going to be 2 other components of the brain that are going to be essential to understand how they work if you're going to understand probably the biggest stumbling block that we're going to have in consistent action towards worthwhile dreams. And there's going to be a thing that we're going to call the self. And what the self is, essentially what your self-knowledge is a set of comparisons about you relative to other people and what it is that you can likely accomplish. So if you tell me that you're out of work, and it turns out you're a 60-year-old lady with an accounting degree, and I say, well, you need to make some money? Yeah, I do. Well, no problem. San Francisco 49ers quarterback went down to an injury. They pay about $20 million a year. Why is that ridiculous? Because she has a self. The self is a set of calibrations. It's a calibration device. If you've ever watched a cat and tried to decide whether or not to jump up a fence or not, you watch them actually push and get a little feedback from their vision and look at the thing over and over again. They're calibrating about whether or not they can do this. They're cycling through memory systems to try to figure out whether or not they've been capable of doing this before, and therefore whether they're likely to be able to do it again. If they're being chased, they'll have a different cost-benefit analysis on whether or not they're going to do it. Okay? And they'll go ahead and attempt it even though they think they might not. Of course, cost-benefit is everything. So the self is a set of calibrations where we've compared ourselves, and we have memory systems that update every night, by the way, in REM sleep, that are essentially telling us where it is that we stand relative to competitors in the esteemed market of the village. And so we also are aware of something else, and that is we know that what these comparisons are in the sense of what our competitive process is. We know what they think of us. We have an estimation about what other people think of us because that is in fact where our calibration is being derived from. So if it turns out that, let's suppose that we're the heavyweight champ of the world, and let's suppose that the world believes that we can beat the number 5 competitor, but suppose that we heard from a few inside people and that they had some tape that nobody's seen, that he can probably beat us. Okay? If we have the situation where other people think we are capable of more than we believe we are capable of, we're in a very interesting dynamic. And that dynamic is we're running a cost-benefit analysis on whether or not we want to send an advertisement to the village. And the answer is going to be no. We don't want that fight. We're going to hide behind our manager, our lawyer, the boxing commission, whether we're going to say the guy needs to have drug testing and we don't trust him, whatever it is, we're going to delay and defer and shuck and jive, and we don't want it. Okay? If a kid is and in fact, it'll even go further. The individual will actually do self-destructive behavior, get injured. Find a way to do what? Hold on to the status as long as possible. Hold on to the esteem as long as possible and avoid the challenge that would result in losing the esteem. If you're a really bright kid in some Midwestern town in the United States, little tiny podunk town, and you're the smartest kid that's come through that town in a long time, and the teachers say, oh my God, this kid's brilliant, he's going to go to Harvard. Oh my God, the kid's brilliant, he's going to go to Harvard. And everybody says that, and your mom's one of the teachers, and your dad's a principal, and everybody says Harvard, Yale, it's right on your forehead. Okay? And when you're ready to about take the SAT, a few months before, you go down to a town where nobody knows you, and you take a sample SAT, and you score well, because you've been studying, but you don't score at Harvard level. You do well, but not that well. So now you got a problem. And the problem is, everybody in the village thinks you're here, but you're here. So now it turns out that the brain runs a cost-benefit analysis and tries to figure out how to get out of this dilemma. How can we possibly hold on to that esteem for as long as possible? And the solution is to self-sabotage. If you get drunk in front of everybody the night before the SATs, then when you come back with good SATs but aren't great, they're going to say, George could have gone to Harvard, but he got drunk the night before the SATs. So you still hold on to the status. That's the way to do it, right? If you're a young kid and your mom thinks you're going to be a great pianist, she puts you with the best teacher in Pittsburgh, okay, and pushes and says you're going to go to Carnegie Hall. when you find out that there's people that have played a lot less than you, that are better than you, when you're about 12 years old, you realize you're not going to Carnegie Hall. What's the right move? Quit. The right move is to quit, and mom says, but you could have gone to Carnegie Hall. As long as she keeps saying that, you aren't going to go near that piano. That's just a motivational trap. The trap is when the self figures out that I cannot meet the expectations of what it is that the village thinks that I'm capable of doing, the right move is to self-sabotage and procrastinate. It is the correct decision, right? Think about how this would have evolved. A young man, average, right down the middle, every characteristic. He's in the Stone Age, he's 17 years old, goes out on his first hunt. Gets separated out from the other men, comes across a wildebeest with his foot stuck in a snake hole. He takes a rock and he hits it over the head, and then he stands 30 feet back and he throws a spear into it, drags it home, tells a big story, and there's a big feast. This guy had on his forehead average mating career, average political career, average children production, average. That's what it was going to be. But now that something spectacular has happened, suddenly the cuter girls in the village are kind of winking at him. He's realizing, hey, I just made a genetic profit. My esteem in the mating community just went up by a notch or two. Is he in any hurry to go on the next hunt? He's highly motivated to see to it that he can't go on the next hunt. The right move is to sprain his ankle. The right move is to delay. The right move is to do anything possible to get out of this being vetted, because he wants to hold on to the esteem as long as he can possibly hold on to it. This esteem meter goes by another name in the history of psychology. We call it the ego. I don't use the ego because it brings a bunch of psychoanalytic concepts into it that I don't want there. But this is how we use the word. Okay? We use the word. If she flirts with Jimmy the guitar player and he flirts back, she tells her friends, that was good for my ego. Felt good to get that esteem signal. If she gets turned down by somebody, that was tough on my ego. She gets turned down by 16 jobs, tough on my ego. Gets a really hot job that says yes, that was good for my ego. That's the word we use for the esteem meters in its process. You're designed by nature to seek this esteem. If you feel like you've already got more than you deserve, then the right move is to procrastinate and not try. And this is a big problem with teachers, coaches, and well-meaning doctors and well-meaning parents, is that we set the bar too high. We don't, and we're encouraging. We want to be the bearer of the good news that if you do this, great things are going to happen for you. That's a very dangerous message, okay? And the danger is that the person on the other side doesn't believe that they're really capable of it. And we think so often the community thinks, particularly positions of authority, that they think that it's the best thing to do to tell a kid that they can do anything and that they can be anything, and that they're sure that you can be successful, and that of course you're going to be successful at this, that, or the other, or whatever it is. And what we do is we drive people into what I call the ego trap. The ego trap is where this motivational mechanism is trapped. It literally would like to try, but it can't afford it. It has too much esteem to lose. And it simply runs a cost-benefit analysis on whether the esteem is worth the risk that it can lose. And if it turns out the risk is greater than the benefit, then it won't do it. We've all been there, okay? And you can feel it when somebody compliments you too much or reassures you about, it's not a problem. You're applying for that injury? You're going to get it. It's like, don't say that to me. I don't know that I'm going to get it. That's not helpful feedback. Okay? All it is ego trapping feedback, and you can feel yourself curl up and get defensive and not want to try and not want to have it be found out that you're even trying, and you procrastinate and you just like this. That's what happens to people. As a clinical psychologist, when I would encourage somebody, I'd say, you can do this. You can lose X amount of weight. You can turn your life. I'll watch this, and first when I see them uncertain, when I was a young clinician, I'd push harder. It's like, well, let me just push you harder then, for God's sakes. I see that you're getting a little shaky and not sure you want to do it. Well, let me reassure you. And you do that, you push harder, and they retrieve more. Okay, they retreat more psychologically. And what happens is if you go the other direction and you say, well, these are good ideas, they don't necessarily work for everybody. Maybe they work for you, maybe they wouldn't work for you. Maybe you can do it, maybe you can't do it, who knows? Now they start to feel inspired. And the reason is they would like to try, they would want to try to do it, they would like to try to turn their health around or their life around, but they don't want to risk being the fool that if you say they can do it and you're so sure and that you reassure them that other people have done it, then what? They're the schmuck that can't? Too dangerous. Okay? So I just want to, for the young doctors here, I want to point that out as a surprisingly tricky trap when it comes to what you would very much want to do, which is to educate and inspire and reassure, etc., and support. Of course you want to, and your instincts are mostly good, pretty good. This is one that most of us miss, okay? And so I want to let you know that if you are tentative about whether or not they might be able to do this or that it would work for them, that can actually be more motivating than if we're confident and overly reassuring. Does that make sense? Okay, question?
I just have a question related to that. How do you feel about talking not just so much success focused, but actually talking about failure and benefits of failure? That's a very popular thing right now, like with Brene Brown and talking about resilience and owning and benefiting from our failed attempts.
Yeah. This is what we're trying to do here is the concept of effort towards attempting to be successful. The only point in doing something is to attempt to be successful. That's the only point. There's no other reason to expend time and energy in the pursuit of any goal. What goals are in nature for all animals is the distance between where your circumstances are and where it is that you think that they could be. Your brain is designed by nature to run a computation on all possible goals and try to analyze how much genetic or survival reproductive benefit would be attached to the attainment of any of those targets. What you then do is you compute the efficiency of all possible goals within your awareness, and you decide which of those goals has the most possible efficiency, i.e. what you're intuiting is how happy would it make me to get it and how likely it is that I think that I could get it. That's how it works. So that person is some armchair theoretician of psychology that doesn't know anything about actually the roots of biology. So it doesn't mean that these people might not have some insights, but they're not actually integrated in an overall framework of understanding motivation. So when we see that all motivation is success motivated, okay, that's what it is. It's designed by nature to try to improve the person's circumstances. What we want to do is we want to actually make sure that we don't have the ego trap operating when we're trying to influence people. So what we want to do is we want to reduce the cost of failure as much as possible and essentially say we may be successful or we may be unsuccessful, but in the process we're going to learn something, okay? And this is what I'm trying to get at is clinically what we would like to do is we would like to put the person in a position where they feel like they don't have very much esteem to lose. Okay? They do have some to lose because they wouldn't even attempt to do this if they didn't think that there was a possibility that they could do it. And if they fail, they will experience some degree of esteem loss because it will be observable then that they were actually not capable at that time of doing this. But what we want to do is we want to mitigate that inference that is so expensive that they cannot take that action by saying, I'm not sure if you're going to be if this strategy of what you're going to do is going to be successful or not. It may be successful or it may not be successful, but it's reasonable. And if it turns out that you fail at this, we'll learn something. Okay, and it's by that communication that we put a person in a position where the benefits of trying are likely to outweigh the benefits of trying and failing. Okay? So that's a very good question. It's right to the heart of this issue. All right. Other questions? Okay. Anyway, we talked about fasting in a second. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear your opinion on, this is kind of switching gears a little bit,
Yeah.
more towards diet. There's like a huge trend now of this ketosis diet,
Yes.
where it's basically 70% of your calories coming from fat, like fatty meats, dairy products, oils, such like that,
Right.
and only 5% from carbs.
Yeah.
And then this is like a very big trend that's almost outpacing plant-based things.
Yeah.
And I know it's unhealthy, but is there any like, what's your opinion on it? Basically? Like physiologically, and it's a huge motivator for people because they lose weight really quickly because of the glycogen loss.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, and they get to indulge in the pleasure trap every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's
So
a mess.
Big trend.
Yeah, I mean, ketogenic diets are a mess. They have appeal because when you're in ketosis, there's an appetite suppressant mechanism probably built by evolution in order to, when humans were out of carbohydrates, they were really out of food. And when they're out of food, the best thing to do is to hunker down for a while and actually get quiet and wait for environmental circumstances to change after a few days. And so we believe that's probably why ketosis is associated with as an appetite suppressant. That's why we see in water fasting, we typically don't see people with gnawing hunger after 4 or 5 days. So people can go weeks and be reasonably comfortable if they've got adequate reserves to fat. We think that that's the way that psychological mechanism works. The fact that you can build a diet that will cause that same process by pulling all carbohydrate out of the diet and trick the brain into thinking that it's fasting and use that as an appetite suppressant mechanism is fascinating. It's been known for over 100 years. And it's interesting that it's also destructive. Okay, the organism is a carbohydrate burning machine. Any responsible physiologist would tell you this. That's how it burns best. That's how it minimizes, and when I say carbohydrate, I'm going to mean whole natural carbohydrates, obviously. And so my opinion of any and all of ketogenic diets is, at best, mediocre, and at worst, a disaster. That's how I see that. Okay, good question. All right. Anything else? Yes.
Well, I just always wondered why many people don't like cockroaches and spiders and are afraid of them, but other bugs like butterflies and ladybugs and fireflies they like.
Yes. The reason is certain animals will have been associated with death in human natural history, and that's why. So, and this is, if you go on YouTube, you'll see a rather cruel, it's not too cruel, but it's a little bit cruel to me because I'm a cat owner and I've got 2 cats. There's people that have done, we've got a vet here, I'm sure knows this, that if you wiggle something that's the size of a snake next to a cat, as soon as it sees it, it'll jump like 3 feet in the air. That's a terrified reflex because snakes have killed a lot of cats, is what that's about. So spiders have killed a lot of people. I think, I could be mistaken, I think this is right. I think spiders may be responsible for like 10,000 deaths a year in human beings worldwide. So it's a non-trivial threat in human natural history. It's interestingly enough, you'll see in nature, whenever something is colorful, it's likely to be dangerous. And if it's colorful and it's casual, it's always dangerous. That's how that works when it comes to bugs. So, or fish or things like this. So that's why I can remember the first time I touched a black widow spider's web. If you've ever done that, it's a very creepy feeling because it's an extremely strong, sticky web. And if you've ever seen a black widow spider, an adult black widow spider, it's terrifying. You know, they have an ugly look to them that reaches right down into human evolution, unlike what other spiders look like. Okay, it'll get right to your gut, and that's because you're evolved with essential pattern recognition mechanisms that tell you that's dangerous.
But cockroaches, do they
Yeah, cockroach, I don't know. Cockroaches may resemble other bugs that have throughout human natural history been dangerous. That's probably what's going on.
Or produce disease.
What's that? Or carry disease, etc. Yeah. Your psychology is a library. It's essentially you're looking at a living fossil. That your preferences for mates, friend, trade, habitat, inputs, etc. You're designed by nature to love to look down on a scene with grass and trees and intermittent trees and lakes and rivers. You're designed and flowers. That's the habitat of your optimal ancestry. And so that's why you see the whole world trying to turn human landscapes into golf courses. That's what the golf course is, a stylized version of an optimal habitat for human beings. We don't want a dense forest because you can't see the predators in a dense forest. We actually are not wild about conifers as much as we are broadleaf trees, because the broadleaf trees are evidence of a more benign habitat for our species. You actually like the look of trees that in a sketch or in a photograph that you can tell that you could climb, as opposed to trees that when you're looking at them, your mind can register that you could not climb them. Okay? And you love looking down on the scene. When you look at any paintings anywhere of any landscapes, you're going to find that the point of view of the person looking at the picture is always looking down into the habitat, because we like to feel the gravitational advantage over predators and competitors. So your preferences and what this new version of psychology is that's been formally born since 1992. It's called evolutionary psychology. It's the understanding that your mind and how it works is just as much a product of evolution and evolutionary design as your hands. Okay? And so your mind is full of preferences and subtleties for all kinds of situations. The most subtle of all is going to be the dynamics involved in the steam process. Okay? Make sense? All right, that's enough for one night. Very good. Thank you, Thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for coming out. Really appreciate it. So for any of the viewers, or if you guys want to learn more about the Fasting Escape, just go to www.fastingescape.com. And if you liked what Dr. Lisle said, Dr. Lisle and I do a weekly podcast, a live podcast called Beat Your Genes Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is. So thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you guys for coming out.